Following day the emperor held a great banquet for Trnt. All the dukes, counts, and marquises ate at the table with him, the emperor and his daughter. The rest ate at the other tables. When the meal was over, there was dancing. After they had danced for a while came the collation. Then the emperor had them mount their horses, so that he could show Trnt the entire city. Afterwards the emperor called for a general council, and he told his daughter to be there because many times he had said to her, "My daughter, why don't you come to the council often so that you will know how it is conducted? After I die, you will need to know how to rule your land." The princess went, both to see how the council was run and to hear Trnt talk. And when everyone was seated at the council, the emperor spoke to Trnt. "I beg you, captain, to prepare for the battle with our enemies, the Genoese. We have received news that the Genoese ships coming from Tuscany and Lombardy have reached the ports of Aluis, filled with soldiers, horses, and provisions. Our own ships have reached the Isle of Eubony, and I believe they will soon be here." Trnt took off his cap and said, Command me to go against the Genoese whenever you wish, your majesty. I am ready." "I'll tell you what you must do for now," said the emperor. Go to where my judgment seat is. I want you to sit on it, listen to the cases brought before you, and judge them with mercy." One of the members of the council, named Montsalvat, stood up and said, "Sire, your majesty should take a closer look at these matters, for there are three obstacles. First, the Duke of Macedonia should not be deprived of his rights. He has the captaincy, and it is his privilege since he is closer to the throne. Second, it should not be given to a foreigner who has no official position in the empire. Third, before the soldiers leave here, they should make a pilgrimage, bearing gifts to the island where Paris stole Helen, for that is how the Greeks were victorious over the Trojans in ancient times." The emperor could not tolerate the knight's foolish words, and he said very angrily, "If it were not for the respect I have for our heavenly Father, I would have you beheaded. It would befit all your merits, and it would be a sacrifice to God and an example to this world, because you are a wicked Christian. It is my command that Trnt, who is our captain now, be above all our captains. He deserves it because of his virtue and shining chivalry. The Duke of Macedonia, who is cowardly and inept at war, never knew how to win a battle. The person I will designate will be captain, and anyone who contradicts him will receive my punishment in such a way that they will be remembered throughout the world." The emperor stood up and would not hear another word from anyone. He had a proclamation read throughout the city that anyone having a complaint against anyone else should go to the Hall of Justice the following day, and from that day forward justice would be meted out. The following day the captain sat on the imperial judgment seat and heard everyone with a complaint, and made judgments on all of them. For from the time the Grand Turk and the Moorish Sultan had come into the empire, no justice at all had been given. 2 weeks after Trnt came, all the emperor's ships arrived, carrying men, wheat, and horses. Before the arrival of the ships, the emperor presented the captain with 83 large and beautiful horses, and many suits of armor. Trnt had Deiphobus come up first so he could choose from the weapons and horses. Then Ricart made his choice, and finally all the others, while Trnt took nothing for himself. Trnt was deeply in love with the princess, and his suffering increased daily. His love was so great that when he was with her he did not dare talk to her about anything concerning love. And the day for his departure was drawing near, for they were waiting for only the horses to recover from the hardships they had endured at sea. The discreet princess knew about Trnt's love. She sent a page to ask Trnt to be at the palace at noon, because that was the time when all the others would be resting. When Trnt received his lady's command, he was the happiest man in the world. He immediately sent for Deiphobus to give him the news and to tell him that she wanted only the two of them to go. Deiphobus said, "Captain, I am very pleased at this beginning, even though I don't know what the end will bring." At the appointed hour, the two knights went up to the palace and quietly entered the princess's chamber, hoping to have victory. When she saw them, she was very happy. She stood up and took Trnt's hand and made him sit next to her. Then Deiphobus took Stephanie by one arm and Widow Repose by the other, and led them aside so they would not hear what the princess was saying to Trnt. The princess smiled and softly said, Since you are a foreigner, I would not want you to come to any harm unknowingly. I know that you came to this land at the bidding of the king of Sicily because he had confidence in your merits, but he could not tell you of the danger that might befall you because he did not know about it." Trant answered, "So that you will not think me ungrateful for what you are telling me, I kiss your hands and feet, and I promise to do everything your highness commands me." Trant begged her to give him her hand so he could kiss it, but she would not. Then he insisted several times, and when he saw that she still would not, he called Widow Repose and Stephanie. To satisfy the captain, they begged her to allow him to kiss her hand. She did it this way, not wanting to let him kiss the back of her hand. She opened it so he would kiss the palm, because kissing the palm is a sign of love, and kissing the back of a hand is a sign of dominance. Then the princess said to him, "Blessed knight, may merciful God keep you from the hands of that ravenous lion, the Duke of Macedonia. He is a cruel and envious man, and very knowledgeable about treachery. He is infamous for the fact that he has only killed people wickedly. It is well known that he killed that valiant knight, my brother. When my brother was fighting courageously against the enemy, he came up behind him and cut the straps of his helmet so that his head would be uncovered, and he was killed by the Moors. A great traitor like him should be feared. And so, virtuous knight, I advise you, when you are in battle, be wary of him. Don't trust him even while you are eating or sleeping." It happened one day at dinner time that Trant found the empress and the princess still at the table. He came into the hall and served the empress and her daughter as steward and cupbearer, since this was his privilege as captain. When Trant saw that the meal was nearly over, he asked the empress to clear up a matter he was uncertain about. The empress answered that if she could, she would do it very gladly. "Tell me, my lady," said Trant, "for a knight which is most honorable, which is most honorable, to die well or to die badly, since he must die?" And he said not a word more. The princess said, "Holy Mother of God, what a question to ask my mother! Everyone knows it is better to die well than to die badly." Then Trant struck the table with a clenched fist and muttered, "So be it," so softly that they could barely hear him. Without another word, he got up and went to his lodgings, and everyone was left astonished at Trant's behavior. The following day, the princess was feeling very upset by what Trant had said. In the morning, while the emperor was at mass with all the ladies, Trant went into the church for prayer, and he told the emperor, "Sire, the galleys are ready to go to Cyprus to bring back the provisions. Does your majesty want them to leave?" The emperor said, "I wish they were 100 miles out to sea right now." Trant quickly went to the port to give the order for them to set sail. When the princess saw Trant leaving, she called Deiphobus and asked him to give Trant the message that after he had eaten he should come to see her immediately, because she wanted very much to talk to him, and that later they would dance. When Trant heard the news, he considered at once what it might mean. He had the most beautiful mirror bought that could be found, and put it inside his sleeve. When he thought it was about time, they went to the palace and found the emperor talking to his daughter. The emperor saw them coming and sent for his minstrels, and they danced for a good while. After watching them for a time, the emperor withdrew to his chambers. The princess immediately stopped dancing, and taking Trant by the hand, they sat at a window. The princess said, "Virtuous knight, I have great pity for you, seeing how disturbed you are. Tell me, I beg you, what is troubling you?" "My lady, since your highness is forcing me to tell you, I can only say that I am in love." He said nothing more, and lowered his eyes. "Tell me, Trant," said the princess, "who is the lady that is causing you so much pain? If I can help you in any way, I will be very glad to." Trant put his hand in his sleeve, drew out the mirror, and said, "My lady, the face you will see here can bring me life or death." The princess quickly took the mirror, and with the hurried steps she went into her chamber, thinking she would find a portrait of some woman in the mirror, but she saw only her own face. Then she was astonished that a lady could be courted in this way, without words. While she was happily reflecting on what Trant had done, Widow Repose and Stephanie came in. They found the princess sitting with the mirror in her hands, and they said to her, "My lady, where did you get such a pretty mirror?" The princess told them about the way Trant had declared his love for her, and she said that she had never heard it being done before. Not even in all the storybooks I have read have I ever found such a graceful declaration. How knowledgeable these foreigners are!" Widow Repose answered, "Tell me, my lady, should your highness be paying as much attention as you are to a servant your father has taken into his house nearly out of charity, and who has thrown out that famous king of Sicily, along with the other foreigners wearing gold and silk clothes they borrowed? Do you want to lose your good reputation for a man like him?" The princess was very upset by what the widow had said, and she went into her chambers nearly crying. Stephanie went with her, telling her not to be upset, and consoling her as best she could. "Isn't it terrible?" said the princess. "Here I am, scolded by the very mistress who nursed me. What if she had seen me doing something really bad? I believe she would have sent out a crier to advertise it in court and to the entire city. I trust God that her wicked, dishonest, cursing tongue will have the punishment it deserves." "It is normal," said Stephanie, "for maidens in court to be loved and courted, and for them to have three kinds of love: virtuous, profitable, and vicious. The first one, which is virtuous, when some grandee loves a maiden, and she feels very honored when others know that he dances, jousts, or goes into battle for her love. The second is profitable, and it is when some gentleman or knight of ancient and virtuous lineage loves a maiden and sways her to him with gifts. The third is vicious, when the maiden loves the gentleman or knight for her own pleasure, and he is generous in words that give her life for a year. But if they go too far, they can end in a heavily curtained bed among perfumed sheets where she can spend an entire winter's night. This last kind of love seems much better to me than the others." When the princess heard Stephanie say such a witty things, she began to smile, and most of her melancholy left her. While they were talking, the empress asked where her daughter was, since she had not seen her for a long time. She went out into the hall and met the empress, who asked her why her eyes were red. "My lady," said the princess, "all day long I've had a headache." She made her sit on her knees and kissed her at length. The following day Trnt said to Deiphobus, "My brother, go to the palace, I beg you, and talk to the princess. See if you can find out how she felt about the mirror." Deiphobus went at once and met the emperor going to mass. When it was over, Deiphobus went up to the princess, and she asked him what had become of Trnt. "My lady," said Deiphobus, "he left his lodgings to go sit in the judgment seat." If you only know," said the princess, "the trick he played on me. He declared his love for me with a mirror. Just let me see him, and I'll tell him a few things he won't like." "Oh, my good lady," said Deiphobus, "Trnt bought a flaming log and found no wood to burn here." "Yes," said the princess, "but the log has gotten wet. However, here in this palace you'll find a bigger and better one that gives much more warmth than the one you're talking about. It's a log called Loyalty, and it's very tender and dry, and gives happiness to anyone who can warm themselves by it." "My lady, let us do this," said Deiphobus. "If it pleases your highness, let us take some of yours, which is good and dry, and some of ours, which is wet and moist, and let us make a shape in your likeness and Trnt's." "No," said the princess, "it isn't a good idea to make two opposites into one." And they joked in this way until they had returned to her chamber. Then Deiphobus took his leave and went back to his lodgings, where he told Trnt everything he and the princess had said. After they had eaten, Trnt knew that the emperor must be asleep, so he and Deiphobus went to the palace. Through a window Stephanie saw them coming, and she quickly went to tell the princess. "My lady, our knights are coming now." The princess came out of the chamber. When Trnt saw his lady, he made a deep bow before her. The princess returned his greeting with a less pleasant expression than usual. Trnt was not very happy at the lady's expression, and in a low voice he said, "Lady, full of perfection, I beg your excellency to tell me what you are thinking. I don't believe I've seen your highness behave this way for many days." "My behavior," said the princess, "cannot please God, and much less the world, but I will tell you the reason, and your lack of knowledge and goodness will be revealed. What will people say about you when they hear of this, that the emperor's daughter, who is in such a lofty position, has been courted by his captain, whom he loved deeply and trusted? You have not kept the honor and reverence you are obligated to have for me. Instead, you have acted with bad faith and dishonest love." She got up to go back into her chambers. When Trnt saw that she was leaving, he caught up to her, took hold of her shawl, and begged her to listen to him. Stephanie and Deiphobus pleaded with her so much that she sat down again, and Trnt said, "If there was any fault, you must forgive me, for love has absolute control over me. Doesn't your Highness remember the day when the Empress was present, and I asked if it was better to die well or to die badly? And your Majesty answered that it was better to die well than badly. I knew that if I did not let you know of my suffering, one night they would find me dead in the corner of my room. And if I did tell you, I would come to the point where I am now. And so, on my knees, I ask only that after my death your angelic hands dress me, and that you write letters on my tomb that say, 'Here lies Trnt Leblanc, who died of great love.'" His eyes became a sea of tears, and sighing painfully, he got up from the princess's feet and left the chamber to go to his lodging. When the princess saw him leaving so disconsolately, she began to cry uncontrollably, and she sighed and sobbed so that none of her maidens could console her. Then she said, "Come here, my faithful maiden. You know how to have pity on my torment. Poor me, what shall I do? I think he is going to kill himself. That's what he told me, and his heart is so lofty and noble that he would do it. Have pity on me, my Stephanie. Go run to Trnt and beg him for me not to do anything, for I am very displeased at what he told me." The princess was crying helplessly while she said this. To carry out her lady's wishes, Stephanie took a maiden with her and went to Trnt's lodgings, which was very near the palace. She went to his room and found him taking off a brocade cloak, with Deiphobus at his side, consoling him. When Stephanie saw him in his doublet, she thought he had taken off his clothes to place his body in the grave. Stephanie threw herself at Trnt's feet as if he were her real lord, and she said to him, "My lord Trnt, what are you trying to do to yourself? Her Majesty was saying all that just to tease you, I swear it." She was silent and said no more. When Trnt saw Stephanie kneeling down, he at once knelt beside her. He did this because she was a maiden who served the emperor's daughter, and even more because she was the emperor's niece, daughter of the Duke of Macedonia, the greatest duke in all Greece. Trnt replied, "Death does not bother me when I think I'd be dying for such a lady. By dying, I will be coming back to life in glorious fame, for people will say that Trnt Leblanc died of love for the most beautiful and virtuous lady in the world. So, my lady, I beg you to go away and leave me with my pain." The princess was in indescribable anguish when she saw that Stephanie was not coming back with news of Trnt. Not being able to endure it, she called one of her maidens named Blnc. She took a veil and put it over her head so that she would not be recognized, and went down the stairs to the garden. With the garden door open, she went to the house where Trnt was, without being seen by anyone. When she saw Trnt and Stephanie on their knees talking, she knelt down too and said, "I beg you, Trnt, if my tongue said things that offended you, do not keep them in your heart. I want you to forget everything I told you in anger. I beg your forgiveness." When Trnt saw his lady speaking with so much love, he was the happiest man in the world. Stephanie said, "Since peace has been made, my lady, I promised him that your Highness would let him kiss your hair." "I will be very happy," said the princess, "to have him kiss my eyes and my forehead if he promises me, upon his word as a knight, not to do anything untoward." Trnt promised very willingly and swore it, and their sadness turned into great happiness and contentment. The princess, accompanied by Trnt and Deiphobus, quickly went to the garden. The princess told Blnc to have all the other maidens come, and in a short time they were all in the garden, and Widow Repose with them. She had seen all the moves and suffered deeply because of the princess, and with her own involvement in the matter she had even more to think about. The emperor soon saw Trnt and his daughter in the garden. He went down to the garden and said to Trnt, "Captain, I sent for you at your lodgings, but they didn't find you there. I am glad to see you here." "My lord," said Trnt, "I asked for your Majesty, but they told me your Highness was sleeping, so that I wouldn't awaken you. I came here with these these knights to dance or practice some sport." "What a black, evil sport we have," said the emperor. "We must hold a council. It is very important." He gave the order for the council bell to be rung. When everyone in the imperial council was together, the emperor had the emissary come forward and said that everyone should know the bad news because it was not something that could be kept secret. Then he ordered the emissary to explain his mission. Making a humble bow, he said, "Most excellent lord, last Thursday night 14,000 men came on foot and concealed themselves in a large meadow. Because of all the water there, the grass grew very tall, and no one could see them. When the sun rose, we saw horses and Turkish horsemen, who must have numbered in all 1,400, more or less, together in a part of the water. The Duke of Macedonia, a very haughty man of little intelligence, as his actions show, had the trumpets blown so that everyone would mount their horses. The constable and the others, who knows more about war than he does, protested and told him not to leave. But no matter what they said, he would not obey anyone. He went up the river with all his men, and he ordered them to cross, both those on horseback and those on foot. The water came up to the horses' cinches, and there were even places where they had to swim. Near the enemy's side there was a bank that the horses had great difficulty in climbing, and the enemy met them there. At the slightest advance that the soldiers or the horses made, they quickly fell into the water and were not able to get up, and they were all swept down the river. If the Duke had only gone 1 mile upstream, all his men would have been able to get across without getting wet. The enemy drew back a little so that the men would come across, and they pretended to retreat to a small hill there, and the Duke used all his forces trying to take them. When the men in the ambush saw the Greeks fighting so boldly, they came out furiously and fell into the thick of the Christians, spilling their blood. The Duke could not take the fierce battle any longer, and he secretly fled without doing much harm to the enemy, and those who were able to escape went with him. After their victory, the Moors laid siege to the city. The Grand Turk himself came, along with the Moorish Sultan and all the kings who had come to aid them, and all the dukes, counts, and marquises of Italy and Lombardy who were mercenaries. As soon as the Sultan heard the news, he gave himself the title of Emperor of Greece, and said he would not lift the siege until he had taken the Duke and all those with him prisoner, and that he would come here to attack this city. I can tell you, sire, that the Duke has provisions for only 1 month, a month and a half at the most. So, my Lord Majesty, your Majesty must look into what we should do about all this."